Are you ever playing Fortnite and you think, maybe my keybinds could be more optimal? I'm going to be giving you a keybinds checklist. You compare your binds to the checklist and find out if yours are optimal or not. This will work for keyboard and mouse and controller. On top of that, we'll be going over some other stuff, but you can check the timestamps down below and see if you want to skip to those parts or not. Before we hop into it, if you've been liking the content recently, please consider using code JivanTV and checking out the merch, link in description. So let's get into the keybinds checklist. We're going to be going over 3 different tiers of importance for keybinds. We're starting with the first tier. These are the most important keybinds in the game, and when I say the most important, I mean they're the ones that you press the most often and you should have it very easily accessible. The absolute most important ones on this tier 1 list is the edit bind, the build binds, movement binds, jump bind, and shotgun bind if you're on keyboard and mouse. I have my shotgun bind on my mouse button, so my thumb is always on it, ready to pull out the shotgun. And then the build binds, you can have some on your mouse buttons. I personally don't, but it is a good option. Here's an important thing. I recommend assigning 1 finger to 2 build/edit binds, maybe 3 on your index. So you could have your cone and floor on 1 finger, your wall and ramp on another finger, and your edit button on a different finger. You see what I mean? This makes it so you're not over assigning important binds to 1 finger. So also on this list, I have the use button and the reset button. On keyboard and mouse, you should have your use button and your reset button on the scroll wheel. If you don't know how to assign scroll wheel, here's how you do it. You assign scroll wheel down to your reset button, and you assign scroll wheel down also to your edit button. That's how you do it. It's that simple. Now, if you're on controller trying to use this checklist, the most important ones are jump, edit, and build. You should have those assigned to either a right stick and left stick, a paddle, or one of your claw fingers if you're playing claw. And then of course the last most important tier 1 bind is your emote button. Gotta be able to dance efficiently, that's really important. Now onto the tier 2 binds. These are buttons that you should be able to press somewhat easily, that way you don't have to reach across your keyboard to press them. You should be able to hit them pretty quickly. The most important one on this list is probably crouch. That one could even be considered a tier 1 button. Make sure you got that somewhere really easy to press. Lastly, here's your tier 3 binds. The most important one on this list is probably rotating builds, but I don't really rotate my builds too often. However, it could come in use with sliding down hills by rotating your ramps around and sliding down a ramp. If you follow this checklist, you should have very optimal binds. If you place your tier 1s in the most easy to press places, you should be chillin'. Now let's say you're going through and you're switching to more optimal binds. If you're not, feel free to check the timestamps down below to skip to a part of the video for you. What I recommend when switching to new binds is spending most of your time in creative until you're very comfortable in fights. I switched up a few of my binds the other day to make it more optimal for the sliding meta. The way I got used to it in like 2 days was by spending a lot of time in Raider's Peace Control map, maybe 30 minutes to an hour a day, spending a lot of time free building, and then spending a lot of time practicing in 1v1s. Doing the combination of those 3 things got me used to my new binds really fast. If you're switching more than 3 things, it might take a little longer, but I promise, spend your time in creative, that's the fastest way to do it. Same thing applies if you're trying to switch to a new input. I know controller got that big aim assist nerf this season. They might buff it back, but I know a lot of people are considering switching to keyboard and mouse. Again, just spend a lot of time in creative. I wouldn't even recommend touching arena because you're going to get very frustrated from pressing the wrong buttons and all that. If you're going to switch binds, now is the time to do it because we don't have tournaments for another month. Plenty of time to adjust. Next up, we're going to go over a few bonus settings that people ask me all the time. First off, here's my double movement info. I use Wooting double movement software, link in description. You can use keys 2x if you want, but here's my double movement settings. I use ESDF to move, so all I had to do was switch my movement binds on Wooting to ESDF. And now there's 2 key things you need to change in-game to make this work. First, you need to take your movement binds off your settings in Fortnite. And second, you need to lock your input method as keyboard and mouse. And then you gotta have Wooting running in the background while you're playing Fortnite. And voila, you have double movement. Next up, we got visual settings, and I'm gonna be honest, I don't know everything to do with visual settings. I find it to be a lot of personal preference, and it depends on what kind of setup you have. What I recommend doing for the next month is trying out a bunch of different visual settings, whether it be performance on low meshes, high meshes, DX11, DX12. See which one runs best on your PC, and then based on that, you can run that for the whole season. My colorblind is Tritanope 7. The storm is really hard to see on these settings, but I've adjusted to it and I can see it just fine. fine. Again, colorblind is 100% personal preference. And then stretch res, people ask me if it's beneficial. It will save you frames, but again, personal preference and depends on your setup. How many frames can your PC normally run? If it's not much, maybe consider trying to switch to stretch res. I personally like using just native 1920 by 1080. And then last bonus setting is sensitivity. I find sensitivity to be 100% based on the amount of space you have on your desk. If you have a really small mouse pad, you need to adjust your sensitivity to be a bit higher. That way you're not running out of space while building and trying to track people out of the sky. One good way to test this out is hopping into creative mode, moving your mouse from one side of the mousepad space that you use to the other side of the mousepad space that you use, and make sure you can spin in at least one whole circle. That'll be a good judgment on whether or not you're going to run out of mousepad space. I personally really like playing on the lowest sense possible. It makes me feel like I have more control in my flicks. If you play on a super high sensitivity, not only is your aim going to be slightly worse from my experience, it's also going to make it hard to track things in endgame because your sensitivity is so high, it's going to be hard for your eyes to comprehend everything going on around you. With all that being said, I find 8X and Y 800 DPI to be a really good starting point, and then adjusting from there. That's my personal preference. When it comes to controller settings, I am not an expert. I don't play controller, but I do know Colazzo recently posted a controller settings video. What I recommend doing is just picking out a pro that you look up to that has really good aim, really good control over their movement, really smooth movement, and maybe starting with copying their settings and adjusting from there. Okay, that's a lot of info on settings, and pretty much all I have to offer, but there's two more things in this video. First off, I'm going to talk about my settings. My settings are not optimal. People ask me all the time what my settings are and they want to copy them, but I'm being for real here. My settings are not optimal for the normal Fortnite player. I could make my settings super optimal, but I have a bad pinky and bad ring finger on my left hand, my keyboard hand, which means I can't use those fingers for any tier 1 keybinds. I'm showing my settings on screen right now, and you can see my index finger is not only assigned to 3 build binds, it's also assigned to my edit bind, and my reload, and my trap. It's assigned to so much, so I really don't recommend copying my settings. Instead, what I'm gonna do for you is make a fresh set of settings for you guys. And if you're brand new to Fortnite or you're brand new to keyboard and mouse, you're just switching over, these are a good baseline setting for you to start with. You could very easily make your own settings based off the info I gave at the start of this video, but if you don't feel like doing that, you can copy these as well. I hope this video helped you guys out, helped you figure out whether or not your binds are optimal, helped you find a sense, all that stuff. If it did, be sure to hit that like button, sub if you're new, use code JivanTV, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.